Why were you not ready for something like this? Why wasn't there a basement area for just in case?
I don't think anyone in the world was ready for the extent that this pandemic presented. I think that it caught the entire world by surprise, and it's been a learning experience for everyone across the board. And I think what we learned from this will translate into a different approach for years to come. And I can tell you, we're seeing things, the use of technology and platforms like telehealth platforms that have had unprecedented need now that will probably carry on for many years to come.
All right, today is Friday, March 27th, 2020. I thought maybe we shouldn't say the statistics anymore, instead just show them, because the numbers that we're saying, and then when we edit this a few hours later, they're a little different.
They're not that different though, but maybe the argument is that they're starting to grow exponentially, that things are growing much quicker.
No, it just seems weird to show different numbers than what we're saying, but I thought we could talk about specific things with the numbers if there was something that you noticed that was particularly interesting.
You know, as this goes on, I find myself becoming a little numb to everything, and I'm not caring quite as much, even though it's more dire. And I'm wondering if our viewers out there that are in America are like where we were a week or two ago, right? Because we went into lockdown so much sooner than the rest of America, we were looking at the numbers all the time because it's all we had to do.
Yep.
You know. And then I also wonder if people that are outside of America that have already dealt with this, if they're kind of like totally over this and they're like, yeah, America's going to get hard and I don't care anymore, you know? I wonder what the mental state of everybody is around the world. Like, is China just totally, they're acting like they're over it and they're getting back to work and they just don't care at all? Or are they keeping an eye on this as much as anybody now?
I don't know. I do not know, and I don't think that I have seen a legitimate answer to what you do once you have quarantined for a couple months.
Nobody has that answer.
But people in China and Singapore and South Korea seem to have the answer. They just continue working and they wear masks. Like, is that the plan?
It seems like it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. When I look at Singapore's numbers and South Korea's numbers and some of these other countries, they still seem so low. And I guess their argument is just when people, this is the other number I'd like to know. They just say, like, we have hospitals that are prepared for this. When SARS hit us 15 years ago, we prepared for this. But how many people are getting infected by this and then getting sent to the ICU and coming out of it alive? I mean, it seems like there are a lot of people without a cure that still do not survive once you get a ventilator installed, you know? Once you get that ventilator in you, like, is your chance of survival way higher? Or are you pretty much like at a 50-50 chance when you've gotten that far down the road?
I don't know. What's your point?
I'm just saying that, like, without a cure, even if you can prevent the hospitals from becoming overwhelmed, there are still going to be a lot of people that come down with it very quickly and become very seriously ill.
Yeah.
And those people, what percentage, I'm sure this number's out there, but like what percentage of those people are not making it?
Yeah.
Because I would imagine no matter what precautions you can take in an open system like Singapore, where they're still going to work, they're just wearing the masks, there's going to be like more than 10 people that get the virus and then immediately die, even with ICU care. That's all I'm trying to say is, like, it just feels strange that they have such a low number when there's people here in America that are not overwhelmed yet but are still dying because it's just such a fatal disease if you have it for a small percentage of people.
Well, I just saw a video, maybe you saw it as well, with Bill Gates being interviewed.
I've watched a lot of Bill Gates videos.
But
is this the one where he's just like in his house and there's another guy?
Yeah, and he was basically saying that what Trump is suggesting will not work. And what Trump is saying is that he wants to have some places in the country go back to work as soon as possible, whereas hotspots like New York and California may have to remain in quarantine for much longer to, flatten the curve in different areas. It sounds smart to me, but Bill Gates is saying we can't do that. In fact, what we have to do is we all have to do a lockdown, potentially a worldwide lockdown, to limit it. But then I don't recall Bill Gates talking about what's next. He just said China did a really good job of squelching this. But then what?
Well, the good news is that China did their shutdown, and they did it in a very serious way. And after a 6-week period of a shutdown that's more extreme than even the best states in the United States are likely to do, they were able to start opening up again. And the total number of cases there is very, very small. So that's very good news. And as people are developing models, they look at that Chinese data, they look at how the South Korean numbers have gotten under control. So we're entering into a tough period that if we do it right, we'll only have to do it once for 6 to 10 weeks. But we have to do it, it has to be the whole country. We have to raise the level of testing and the prioritization of that testing quite dramatically in order to make sure we go through one shutdown so that we take the medical problem and really stop it before there's a large number of deaths. We do then get an economic problem, which is why you want to minimize the amount of time, and having states go at different things or thinking you can do it county by county, that will not work. The cases will be exponentially growing anywhere you don't have a serious shutdown.
So even because folks look, people who want sort of county by county or say, well, let's get back online faster, say, well, look, in some states there's less than 200 cases. In many states there's less than 200 cases right now. You're saying even in those states, the same kind of shutdown needs to occur?
Well, let's say you have 100 cases, and let's say you don't do a shutdown, then it grows 33% per day. So you take 100, you get 1,000, you get 10,000. It's exponential growth. If you're not stopping it, the sooner you engage in the shutdown, the easier it is to get to that peak. We have not peaked. The parts of the country that aren't shut down, in late April, we should start to see the numbers peak there. They'll still be too high to open up. So you'll probably have to go another month to really get those numbers down. But any part of the country that has cases, and truthfully, because of our problems with testing, because we're not prioritizing testing the right way, that a lot of those places actually do have cases. But even if they have the 100, that will grow, and people do cross county boundaries. And so basically the whole country needs to do what was done in the part of China where they had these infections.
I don't understand what keeps it from coming right back.
Because I believe his latest estimates are 6 to 8 weeks is what we have to lock down to get through this, or maybe just to lower the curve.
Yeah.
But you've been saying this since day one. What happens then? If this started from 1 to 5 people getting it in a wet market and it went crazy viral then, what happens when there's a percentage of the whole world that has it and we decrease all of that down to just 5 people? It seems like it would balloon right back up without some other way to suppress it. You have to stop all travel. You have to stop all international travel. And maybe you can keep it within little pockets of places. But I don't see how that's possible. This feels like this is going to be a much longer thing. And here's what I feel like is happening in the media. I don't want to say they're being dishonest with us, but I do think it is the job of our politicians and our leaders and our president and even our doctors to some degree to not tell us the entire truth. And I think one reason that Trump is saying we will be back to work at Easter is because that's 2 weeks away, right?
A little bit more.
A little,
yeah.
15, 16 days away. I think it's giving people hope that okay, I can handle that timeline. Even though that's not the timeline, it's a way to make people feel I just need to be locked down for 2 weeks. And then what happens? Exactly what happened here in Puerto Rico last night, I believe. We have now been extended until Easter. So I think we are not going out on Easter Sunday. All Sundays, all grocery stores are shut down now. They're coming up with these crazy rules on who can leave their house on even and odd days to go get
food and
to get
medicine.
Groceries and stuff. I'm hearing people talk about we may have to close down grocery stores for days or maybe a week. And so I think what our leaders are doing is they are controlling the fear. Now, a lot of people are going to complain about that and say, how irresponsible is Donald Trump for saying or even suggesting that we're going to go back to work on Easter? And I think that's kind of a valid critique, but I think what they're all doing, and I think Bill Gates is even doing this too. I think Bill Gates really knows. I mean, I don't know Bill Gates, right? But I think he knows that this isn't 6 to 8 weeks. But that is a realistic time frame to put in front of people that they can handle. Because if you start telling people that this might be the entire year, and that as soon as we get locked down for 6 months, we then have to test, and maybe it's going to come back, and maybe we have to start doing this beyond the election cycle. People are already talking about are we going to have an election? I don't think the majority of people can handle that sort of stress. And so I think Bill Gates, I think Donald Trump, I think our Congress, I think all these people, even with the stimulus bill, I think they're intentionally warning us for a month or 2 weeks so that we can handle it. But I do not think in any way that this will be over by any of these predictions. Just it seems crazy.
Well, let me add a disclaimer right now. We've done this in previous videos, but we haven't done it in the last 1 or 2, and people were complaining. This should not be your news source.
This is the debates that happen within homes.
Yeah, we don't know what we're talking about. I'm sure 50% of whatever comes out of Patrick's mouth is wrong. So this is for historical purposes. We are literally doing this so that we can revisit this a decade or 2 from now and kind of see what our thought process was and what was going on at the time and what was in our heads. Do not listen to us for medical advice or anything like that. We're just 2 idiots talking. Continue.
I would just like to know how many of the things that we said in the past have happened. We all knew that Puerto Rico was going to extend this quarantine, and sure enough, now that's happened. Schools are most definitely being closed throughout the country. We said that back when our friend told us that graduation wasn't going to happen. I'm not saying we're right. We're probably wrong 50% of the time, but that's the purpose of this video, is to see what did we think could happen, where things going, and I'm just putting down in video format right now that I think this is going to last a lot longer than even April. I think April is we have to at least be, I mean, there's already countries locking down till June 1st.
I know,
and they're ahead of us.
And now people we recognize are starting to become infected.
Yeah.
Boris Johnson of the UK, he was just infected.
And on the advice of the chief medical officer, I've taken a test that has come out positive. So I am working from home. I'm self-isolating, and that's entirely the right thing to do.
Now, to some degree, this will, I think, possibly galvanise the British population here, some of which have been confused by the government's response, some of which will probably see the fact that if the Prime Minister, with all the precautions around him, can in fact test positive, then they should, in the weeks and days ahead, listen to his advice to, quote, stay at home. He said that he'll be using amazing modern technology, the wizardry, he said, of that magic to continue his job.
It's like a prince or somebody. What's his name?
Oh, Prince Charles.
Prince Charles.
Who's
he's infected.
He's the next to take the throne. If
Queen really? He would be king?
If Queen Elizabeth dies.
And people were saying that 2 or 3 days before him being infected, he was hanging out with the Queen, so he could have infected her.
Yeah.
So, now we're in a 14-day waiting period to see if she would be infected.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is the time to, I don't know if I want to pivot here, but I think it's going to be important to start talking about mental health, because everyone out there has been watching us, or at least me, lose my mind. And that started with being bored and being quarantined and trying to figure out how to go through life as normal. It has to deal with being lonely and being isolated from your friends. It has to deal with we both think that we have the virus, and everyone in this house is coughing and having headaches and having stomach cramps, and we're all this is a symptom, this is a symptom. I'm starting to get to the point where I'm over that hump, and I feel like we don't have it, and that's a huge sigh of relief. But now I'm hearing about people right outside our community that are getting the virus.
In our town.
In our area. And so the fear is that, well, maybe I survived going to Miami, but now I got to worry about it coming in from another way.
And how long until you're safely allowed to leave Puerto Rico? If let's say that in 6 months from now, they start to get things under control a little bit. But you, with your immune system problems or whatever, you're nervous about flying. Maybe they find that flights are really bad for this, and it is contagious in an airplane.
Right now, flights are the best. I'm hearing from more and more people that are taking flights, and they're like, there's 5 people on the plane. And I'm like, this is the time to fly if you had to.
Well, at this very moment, but I'm saying in 6 months from now, if you are nervous about catching it, I think we all agree it will still exist in 6 months from now. Well, now are you trapped in Puerto Rico for months or years? I mean, that's so crazy to think about.
But the other thing going back is, like, I'm hearing people in my WhatsApp group say, like, my dad's employee just passed away. Or a friend of mine that I grew up with, maybe they're older or whatever, they're a nurse on the front line and they just died. Or you're hearing these horrible things where it's like somebody found somebody in a house that had died a week ago, and like they just died and nobody knew. You know, it's like these things are happening outside of the hospital. And so I think we have to prepare ourselves, and we haven't yet. They're seeing people that I know die all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe. But we're about to deal with that now. So at the moment, we've had all this anxiety and stress based on, like, are we going to get it, and are we going to be sick, and what is the market going to do, and what are our jobs going to do? But there's a whole nother level of this when it's like somebody very close to us passes away, and some friend that we know passes away, and you start to see politicians and celebrities, and you know, you start to recognize the names. I think it's going to take a mental toll on all of us in ways that we are not prepared for. And I don't know. I'd be curious to see how our response in these videos is going to change. Because right now it feels just kind of like, oh, we're so isolated. Hasn't really affected us all that much, except for like maybe our savings and our jobs and stuff like that. And I feel optimistic about those things. Those will come back. But when we start having serious situations where like good friends of ours are now sick, and nurses that, you know, we have a lot of friends that are in the medical field, when they start getting sick, you know, and heaven forbid they start passing away, I think our mood's going to change a little bit. We had an employee die recently, and that has like messed with my mind. Like, we've only had a handful of employees that worked in our office in Fstoppers, and somebody passed away recently, and it's just really kind of shaken me a little bit, because I was like, 2 years ago, he was in our office sitting next to me every day. But what happens when you extrapolate that out, and it's like, man, I know 20 or 30 people personally that have died from this. I've never dealt with death that much. Like, I haven't had a lot of deaths in my life, and all my grandparents died when I was young, and so I don't know how we're going to handle this when it's like a handful of people pass away from this, and you're like, man, this is, it's a lot more real, you know? And I think we need to prepare for that.
Yeah, I would like to put things in a little bit more perspective. Obviously, things could get much, much worse. But I do want to point out something interesting. My mom texted me yesterday and said, did you know that your aunt died of the swine flu? And I said, I had no idea. This was just a couple of years ago, or a few years ago. I don't remember exactly when.
Your aunt, so your mom's sister?
My dad's sister. And she had Down syndrome, and she had already lived much longer than they expected. I think people with Down syndrome have a shorter life expectancy anyway. And so she went into the hospital, kept getting worse and worse and worse, and ended up, I think, going on a ventilator and everything, and then ended up...
She was in the hospital because of swine flu or for something else?
I guess swine flu.
Okay.
Which then probably led to a pneumonia and bronchitis, whatever. Like, probably the same stuff that's going on here.
Yeah.
But in my mind, and I'm sure the way it was explained to everyone, it was like, she was very old for her age, and she had Down syndrome, and she got sick with a common ailment, but it kept progressing, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse.
Everything kind of was justifiable. You kind of said, oh, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah, it's exactly where
well, this
I'm
is
going
starting
with this.
we're starting to see like young doctors and people on the front lines getting sick and dying. Like, people
I've read these statistics. I think I read something that like 86 doctors in Italy have died now, which sounds horrific. That sounds horrible. But then, you know, you start wondering how many of those doctors were over 70 or 80 years old. My only point is that we have had outbreaks before, and not only do we not do anything for them at all, like we didn't have you even heard of people dying of swine flu? I didn't even like consider that, and it was in my family. You know, I didn't know. And so the fact that now people who would have died anyway and are going to, we're all going to die, right? And like people in their 80s and 90s are going to die soon, no matter what. It's just like statistically a fact. But instead of just saying, well, you know, they were unhealthy and, you know, it was their time, we're going, that is coronavirus. And that is the only reason they're dying is coronavirus. I just feel like it's not a totally healthy way of thinking of things, because people are dying of diseases
They're dying of
every day.
pneumonia normally, or they're having heart attacks or strokes.
And
or
young
like any
people
number
die
of
of these things too.
Yeah.
And if we had a counter of every person that died from a stroke the second it happened, and we were like, oh my God, like we have to stop this from happening. And I mean, I was talking with my wife earlier, and she was mentioning that, you know, her grandmother recently passed away, and she fell, broke her hip, and then from there like progressed and progressed and progressed. And that happens to a lot of people, a lot of old people. But we never say, oh my gosh, it's from these old people standing and being mobile. We must immobilize these old people, because look, these falls are killing everyone. And the second we get people to stop walking, then we can all be safe.
The difference there, though, is I assume those numbers are consistent over the years. The same number of people die every year from falling down the stairs, as they do from lightning strikes, as they do from car wrecks, or you take all these different things. But this is very different because it's a novel virus that has not killed anybody, and it's happening exponentially. And we will probably be able to say these deaths happen in a 6-month period and then never happened again.
Right.
You know, and so I don't know that it's fair. I see what you're saying. I totally see what you're saying, but I don't know that it's 100% fair, especially when young people are dying of this too. Maybe you'd say young people fall and break their hip and then it's a downward spiral.
That might be, no, I don't think that's a downward spiral, but I think young people die of the flu. I think little babies die of the flu.
It does seem to be that the flu is more dangerous to younger people than coronavirus is. But, you know, on one hand, I'm telling you, all these politicians and everybody are trying to like keep us at ease by warning us that, or, you know, making us feel like we're going to be over this soon. But on the other hand, the media is kind of playing devil's advocate here and putting nurses on television that are showing horrendous things and making us super fearful. And somehow these two forces allow us to like keep a stability while also taking the risk as it is, you know? If we just said, like, don't worry about it, not that many people are dying, which I think is probably still the thread of truth through all this, I really don't think this is quite as bad as we're making it out to be. But
it's certainly not that bad yet.
You can't tell people that, because it could make it really bad.
Of course.
If the death rate was 10% or something. And the reality is, we still, no matter how many numbers we have, we still don't really know if this is 1% death rate, 4% death rate, 0.5% death rate. Like, it's very, very difficult.
Italy, it's like over 10% currently, last time I looked. It's
crazy. It just doesn't seem like we have any idea what the numbers truly are.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this thing so difficult to deal with.
Well, I was watching Cuomo in New York. He was talking about their preparation.
Is the possible apex of the curve. It changes a little bit depending on the data day to day, but now we're looking at about 21 days for a possible apex. So we want to do everything we can to be ready for that increased capacity that could hit us in 21 days and ramp up the hospital capacity. We are doing everything we can. We're doing things that have never been done before. We're doing things that when we put them on the table, people thought they were impossible. But we are now doing the impossible, as you know well here, with what you did over the past week. All hospitals have to increase their capacity by 50%. We're asking hospitals to try to increase their capacity 100%, because we need that many beds. We're also looking at converting dorms. We're looking at converting hotels. We've been gathering equipment from everywhere we can, PPE equipment, Most important piece of equipment for us are ventilators, and we're shopping literally around the globe to put it all in place.
I am just really impressed with every time he speaks. I feel like he's being honest but hopeful, but he's getting down to business, and he just talks numbers and he talks game plans. Anyway, I've just been very impressed with what Cuomo has been saying, and they've turned the Javits Center, which we've been to Photo Plus there. That's a makeshift hospital now. They're opening up 4 other hospitals in the near future, like in the next few days, and then they want to open up 4 more. I mean, they are taking like gymnasiums and arenas and stuff and turning these things into hotels. It's crazy what they are doing. I mean, it seems like a war. It seems like,
that's what they're calling it.
We have been bombed by other countries, and we have to, all hotels must become hospitals now. It's just so wild to hear.
Yeah, and apparently, one of the reasons people die is because they develop pneumonia and their lungs collapse on themselves. So somehow, I don't even know how they're doing this, they're turning these rooms into negative pressure rooms.
I heard him say
so
that.
The idea would be that like your lungs would naturally inflate. It'd be like taking a balloon underwater, and as you pull it under, it's going to like stay. Well, it'd be the opposite of that. It'd be like taking a balloon in the air, and eventually it'll continue to open. Whereas what's happening now is like taking a balloon underwater, where the pressure of your lungs are...
Yeah, how the heck can you do that?
What we need to do is we need to go in there. These hotels are empty. The people don't have jobs. We would go in and cut a contract to be able to have the state set up a lease with that particular facility, and then we would then take the building over in a period of exceptionally short amount of days, and we would go in and turn this into an ICU-like facility. So there's really 4 different phases. The state has to nominate the facilities in a prioritized order, and I'll talk about Governor Cuomo in a minute. Number 2 is the Corps of Engineers has to come in and to be able to modify for that facility. And we can go into more details and other questions, but it goes back to be able to change the pressure in certain hotel rooms to be able to have a negative pressure in a hotel room. The third thing is then you've got to be able to put the supplies in that. And FEMA, working with HHS, is come up with a list that every single hotel room would get the same amount of supplies. It would just go in and all right be there. And then the fourth step is to be able to staff it. This has to be a state job. The state has to put the people in there. You got to clean it and train it. And therefore, just think, you've all been in hotels. Think of the second floor of a standard hotel. The rooms would be like a hotel room, and then we would build nurses stations in the halls. We would have all of the equipment wireless going into the nurses station, so you could monitor how those are going to work.
Something else big, I think the House passed the Senate, or the House passed the bill that the Senate had already...
Did that happen?
I believe that happened, and then at 4 o'clock, which is 19 minutes ago, Trump was supposed to sign it, and he says he will.
Did it pass unanimously like it did the Senate? Senate, it was like 96-0, like nobody was opposed to it. Has that happened at all in the last couple of years?
I didn't read that. Maybe we can show an article or something if we find it during editing, but I did see a video of AOC very upset with this bill, and she thought it was outrageous that the majority of the bill is going to pay to bail out these corporations, and that the American people are getting the crumbs or whatever.
Which is, from what I've seen, not true.
Country, Queens, New York, 13 dead in a night in Elmhurst Hospital alone. Our community's reality is this country's future if we don't do anything. Hospital workers do not have protective equipment. We don't have the necessary ventilators, but we have to go into this vote eyes wide open. What did the Senate majority fight for? One of the largest corporate bailouts with as few strings as possible in American history. Shameful. The greed of that fight is wrong for crumbs for our families. And the option that we have is to either let them suffer with nothing, or to allow this greed and billions of dollars, which will be leveraged into trillions of dollars, to contribute to the largest income inequality gap in our future.
Should we go over the bill? Like, have you read it? Do you know some of the
I certainly have not read all 800 pages.
Well, I have, and I wanted to go through. So they're saying this video that I watched. The guy was kind of calling it like a wartime stimulus. This is like there to support people and not to like just spur the economy.
Sure.
None of this money is going to spur the economy. I think we all can agree that like this is going to prop up rent and prop up wages. So there's a few things in here, and I don't know how all this works, but there's an element that's just a direct deposit to individuals. And this says you'll get $1,200 checks sent to you instantly if you make less than $75,000 a year. Now, how many checks and how long this is for?
I heard under $99,000 a
Well, there's
year.
more of this.
Okay.
So you will get a smaller check if you make less than $99,000. So I guess it's like 75 to 99, that window.
Okay.
You'll get a smaller check.
Yeah.
But then the way that's written, it makes me think like, are you getting no check if you make over $100,000?
Which is funny because, I kind of agree, like, wealthier people shouldn't need this, but I think I know a lot of people who make over $100,000 who spend all of their money. Is this per individual or per household?
Per individual. So you will
double. So you could make 200 grand.
Right. So, and then it says $500 per child for a family income up to $198,000. So I think that is if you take the 99K, multiply it by 2, you get $198K.
Yeah.
So you can get $500 per child for a family making up to $200,000. And maybe people are going to be mad at me because $200,000 seems like a lot of money for a household. But does that mean that people making $200,000 or even just slightly more and have lots of children are not going to be eligible for the $500 per kid at all?
That's the way I understood it, and I have not read it, neither of you. We just watched a quick video where somebody was kind of summarizing it.
Yeah.
It seemed to me like people who make over 100 grand or 200 grand jointly don't get it.
Right.
Which seems totally reasonable to me, but like I said, if this isn't a stimulus and it's just to help you pay your mortgage or whatever, these people might need it. However, aren't there all these other things happening that, like you don't have to pay your mortgage for up to 4 months or whatever? You can. I've seen videos about this as well.
Yeah, and I don't know that I have that written here. I don't know, like the mortgage forgiveness and stuff. Like, I think this money is trying to help pay that, but there's probably an element there too. The other part of this is the small business side. Now, there's the SBA, which is the Small Business Association, and they have something.
I think it's Small Business Administration.
Administration?
I think so.
Okay, well, obviously look this up, but they have $300 billion going towards that. And from what I've read, this administration can be rather slow.
Yeah.
So this is not going to be given out necessarily in a week or two, but this might take longer to implement. But what this is doing is it's being used for mortgages, rent, and payroll of a business owner. So if you're like my parents and you have a dental practice but you rent the space, they would need to take this business loan. If you have a mortgage, I don't know how that works. Can you have a mortgage? I guess if you own your property,
Sure.
You own a commercial space, you have a mortgage on that. Payroll, if you need to keep all of your employees paid, you will apply for this small business loan. And then does it seem like this is totally just forgiven sometime down the road?
No, that can't be.
I think that's what I've been reading, is that this is it's like going to be forgiven. It's already a 0% interest rate, right? It's got to be. But if it's not, then why wouldn't you just default on why wouldn't you just fire people? What would be the advantage of going into debt and having to pay a loan? Just it's so expensive to like train people and rehire?
I don't know. I mean, I have talked to multiple business owners in the last few days who said they are going to fire their employees. They have to. And then they're going to get the biggest loan they possibly can. They're going to gamble it all in the stock market, and then they will hire their employees back when their business picks back up again. But they are not going to keep their employees on.
Well, this video and article that I read, they were saying like because it's going through the SBA, you will have to show economic loss somehow.
That's easy. That's easy for every person on the planet. You
yeah,
could do that
but
so
if you
easily.
fire all of your employees, are you going to be eligible then for the loan that's supposed to be used for payroll? I don't know. There's all these like inner workings that don't make sense. The next part of it is unemployment, and this is where I get kind of confused here too, because if you're sent at home, you're not technically unemployed if your boss hasn't fired you, right? But basically what it's saying is you can get up to $600 per week for eligible unemployed people making less than $60,000 a year. So I believe that is on top of the $1,200 that you'll get just from the government. So maybe it's like at the state level, you're going through unemployment and getting $600. At the federal level, you're getting this $1,200.
It looks like they created a new category of unemployment for people that have had to quit. Or what, like how is that going to work?
Yeah, so it looks like in dollar terms, another $600 per week eligible for employees that are making, I think, anywhere below about $60,000.
Another $600 on what they would normally do.
Correct, which I believe is close to 240. It depends on the total wage and also the state. The state has a lot of control over how this all goes. But ultimately, to roughly push out 2 to 3 times what would typically be available for unemployment beneficiaries, again, to keep the lights on, keep the rent being paid, keep food going on the table. I think that's a pretty generous part of the package, alongside of an expanded sick leave policy, up to 12 weeks available for employees who need to take some sort of leave to take care of someone due to the virus.
But then again, it's like, are you really unemployed? Is there a game there where like employers are like, let me fire you and I'm going to get this loan, and then you get the unemployment, but then maybe I'll hire you back?
I have talked to somebody who owns their own business, and he said he is firing his employees because they will make more money from the government during the next 4 months with all the stimulus stuff, and then he will hire them back after that runs out. And I mentioned yesterday that I was very nervous. I've heard some people speculate that you could potentially make more money from the government, just like my friend was saying, than you could at your job.
Well, I did some of the math here. So if you're unemployed and you get $600 a week, and I'm sure there's caveats here, right, that I'm not accounting for, but that's $2,400 a month, 6 times 4, plus you get the $1,200 in direct deposit, just by yourself. I guess if you had a wife or husband, you could double all these numbers. If you extrapolate that out, that's $42,000 of income for the year.
Before children, $500 a month for children.
Right. And $42,000 a year is bordering, that's like a paycheck to paycheck lifestyle for the most part, right? It's
I don't
not
know that I would
really
agree with that, but okay.
If you're making $3,600 a month, that could be more than what you made being employed.
Yeah, and I was listening to Peter Schiff. I have a few recordings that you can put in this video, where he was bringing this up, and he was like, we will now, people have worried that
universal basic income?
Well, universal basic income or welfare or whatever is incentivizing people to
stay at
not
home and
work.
Right.
I've literally heard people say before that they are having more children because the government pays them extra money each month to have more children. So that's like the bad side of giving these handouts and everything. And he's like, now we are offering it to potentially every American, and we are offering it in the simplest way possible. It's like in many cases, some of this money's coming whether you do anything at all. You don't have to apply for anything. It's just going to come.
I'm not going to take advantage of this. I think it's wrong for me to do that. But we live in Puerto Rico, but we still have returns in America. We still have I still have some money coming in because I do an IRS return. So maybe I could apply for that too. Maybe it would be super easy.
But I'm saying
simple.
I don't know that we need to apply. The stimulus money just gets direct deposited into your account.
You have to have something.
I don't think so.
You have to have a tax return, because this is the other
argument. You have to have a tax return.
This is the argument a lot of people have, is that the people that are here illegally, or the people who haven't had jobs or have never filed a tax return, they're going to be ineligible. Homeless, they're going to be ineligible to get this money because you need the tax return.
But we have tax returns in the States.
All right, well, you just said 30 seconds ago, I don't think I need the tax return. I think that's the one thing that you do need.
But I'm saying anyone watching this video has been doing their taxes. I'm saying the money is coming to your bank account for free without any work from you whatsoever.
There's a lot of people out there who will actually earn more money unemployed than they will employed. And maybe earn is not the right word. I mean, get, right? People will be paid more not to work than they will to work. And it dawned on a few Republicans that this is a bad idea. That why should we give people an extra incentive not to return to work? I mean, we may need people working and being productive, but if we pay them more money to take a vacation, they'll choose that than going to work. And so they actually put in a provision that would have limited the benefits that unemployed people get to the salary they were earning when they had a job. So if you were earning $500 a week when you were employed, the most you can earn being unemployed was $500 a week, right? You couldn't get extra. You could just get what you were earning. And surprisingly enough, they voted that down. Right, so there was a majority of senators who didn't want to do that. They wanted people to make more money not working than they made working. Why? Well, I guess they don't want them to work, because clearly people aren't idiots. If you get a choice, you can make $500 a week, right, and go to work, or $800 a week and stay home. I mean, what are you going to pick? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. In fact, even if the Senate had fixed the problem, right, so that you made exactly the same amount of money working and not working, that would solve nothing. Because even for equal amounts of money, people are going to choose not to work. Number one, sometimes work is hard. It's boring. It's tedious. I mean, most people don't look forward to work. They look forward to the weekends, right? It's not thank God it's Monday. It's thank God it's Friday. Why? Because Friday is the last day of the work week. People don't want to work. Well, the government just said you could turn every day into a weekend day, right? It's a weekend for 4 months. Right? So people are going to choose for the same amount of money. I'd rather not work than work.
I said this in yesterday's video. What happens when people start writing the blog posts and the YouTube videos about here's how to apply for unemployment and get an extra, how much money did you say? $2,400 a month?
Yep.
Everyone's going to do that. Imagine all of our friends who don't like their jobs or find their jobs kind of annoying. Peter Schiff he made the argument that what about people what if it was the same amount of money, or maybe it was even a little bit less, right? But you don't love your job and maybe you have to commute to your job.
If you could remove the commute and 36 hours of working and you lose $100, everyone would be like, heck yeah, I'm doing that.
Exactly.
Most people have some kind of commute back and forth to work. Some people have a really long commute. They don't get paid for that. That's just wasted time. It costs money. You got to pay for gas, wear and tear on your car, or maybe you're taking public transportation, right? Maybe you have to pay tolls, whatever. I mean, you save all that money by not working. So if you are paid the same amount of money not to work, you're actually making more money than if you went to work, because you save on the expense of getting back and forth to work. You save on the costs of commuting back and forth to work. Now you have all this free time to be with your friends, to be with your family, to take a vacation. I mean, so this bill in and of itself is going to greatly extend the duration and the severity of this downturn by massively incentivizing a significant percentage of the workforce to deliberately stay unemployed. That is what is going to happen.
So he was just speculating, like, how are we going to, first of all, keep everyone
at bay
to not do this? Yeah, like everyone's going to want to do it.
And then how are we going to motivate people after this to say, hey, you had it, I won't say you had it good. This is a horrible time. But like, you sat on your couch and played Half-Life Alyx, and now you have to get back to work, and you're gonna do a lot more work, but you're gonna get just 5% more income.
But the amount of damage that can be done to the economy in that amount of time, I mean, we lived through 2008 when a lot of our friends were laid off and a lot of our friends went on unemployment. And what did we see them do? We saw them add the how to get money contact in their phone. We saw them memorize the keypad of you have to answer the questions.
It's call unemployment and it says, have you looked for a job? 1. It's like 1. Are you declining work from somebody? And you'd have to say no.
Yeah.
And you would know that it's like 1, 2, 1, 1.
Yeah.
And then boom, I get my next paycheck.
Right. And we watched our friends not actively go out and try to find other work because they were getting free money.
We knew a friend who we were pretty close with. He got all that money and then he bought train tickets and traveled around America.
Traveled America, exactly. So imagine.
And he wasn't, I want to be clear, he's not you might say he's a bad guy because he did that. That seems very dishonest, but he's not a bad guy. I don't want to criminalize or act
it's just human nature.
It's just human nature. This is what people do.
Yeah, and you can justify it by saying we've all paid into this, or this is the money that we're all getting. You know, it's not like I'm applying for this money. I'm just being sent.
They voted for this, and like this is what everyone
gets
getting it
this.
too. Yeah.
So if I've saved a little bit of money, maybe I can go travel the world now on this money. But in the amount of time, let's say that we get this somewhat under control in the next month or two, and people start going back to work. But the majority of Americans are like, if I don't go back to work, I can have 2 more months off and make potentially more money.
Yeah.
In those 2 months, how many businesses will fail in those 2 months? And then when they try to come back, those employees, there will not be jobs available. It could potentially like put a roadblock right in the middle of our recovery. And you know, I'm complaining a lot here, and it's very easy for me to do that as someone who's not in charge and I can't be held responsible. I don't know what the answer is.
I mean, clearly everybody voted for this. Now, I'm sure there was Democrats, I think, that were upset about some things, as there was probably Republicans that might have been upset with a few things, but everybody voted for this. They all unanimously said...
It just sounds so similar to the bank bailouts in 2008. And now, I think it's Bernie, who, was Bernie one of the few people who refused to do the bank bailouts?
Yeah.
And now he's saying it was a big mistake to do that. I mean, most people I talk to act like bailing the banks out was a big mistake back then.
Bernie didn't want to bail the banks out.
Right.
And now he's saying, I made the right choice.
Yes. But we're now in the exact same situation again.
Maybe we're now giving money though to people, and maybe in 10 years we'll say that was the worst decision, giving individuals money.
Well, it's not just that. Like, we're bailing out the cruises and the airlines. Like, a bunch of this money is going to all of that.
Okay, so I talked about the unemployment, and then the last thing, and this is where AOC, I think, I don't want to say she's wrong, but 25% of the money, so not the majority of the money, but 25%, $1.5 trillion. It's a $2 trillion bill. So 25% of the full bill is going to support big corporations. It's like a corporate buyout, and they're saying that this is clearly the most debated part of this bill. This is the part that people were upset with because it looked like 2008, right? But I've also been reading that this gives the government's kind of playing around with the idea of investing the money into companies and into their own equity. Like somehow the government might own stock shares.
Right.
So the idea could be, I don't remember what happened in 2008, if they just flat out gave them money and then they bought all their own stock back.
I thought it was loans that were then repaid. That's what I thought, but I don't know. And if that's true, it doesn't seem that offensive, you know.
If the government could own part of the profits.
Well, no, not even that. If you offer a huge corporation a loan, and they pay you back with interest, then it worked perfectly. You saved the corporation had to pay interest.
I don't know that they paid that interest back, though.
I mean, I know Tesla did. Tesla was one of these companies that got bailed out or whatever.
In 2008?
I think so.
Wow.
And Elon Musk paid it back early with interest, and he's always bragged about it because people always say the government gave Tesla all this money, and Elon has always said, yes, they gave us a loan and we paid it back. So I don't know why that's so offensive. That seems reasonable.
Yeah. I like the idea of, I don't know enough about all of this to say if stock buybacks are bad. You always hear that they are, but then some economists talk about or investors, they talk about why that's actually could be a good thing.
I know, it doesn't seem unreasonable to me, but
you're just buying back parts of your own business that you've sold off, you know?
Right.
But again, this is above my head, but if the government could have some investment in the equity of those companies as they rise and get back up off their feet, it seems like that would be a good thing too. It's kind of like paying back a loan in a different way. You know, it's the whole reason we all invest. We all buy into these companies at tiny, tiny fractions, hoping that the company is more successful, and then our stock value is now higher because we have risked our own money in investing in these companies. Yeah. So it seemed like an interesting thing. One question, I mean, I got a couple questions here that I know my parents have been asking, but say you're a CEO and you own a dental practice like my parents. On the LLC, my parents have to pick a position.
Okay.
It's like you might be the president of Fstoppers and I'm the treasurer or something. You know, if you're a CEO of a dental practice or your own restaurant or you're a photographer, photography might be a little bit different, but if you pay yourself through a W-2 wage, are you then eligible for both the loan element because you're the business owner, but then also the unemployment? You can't, if you're a CEO, you can't fire yourself, right? But you are still unemployed, just like your staff who you sent home. So I don't know exactly what happens there, because
maybe you could lay yourself off for a short time
and just stop being the CEO of like your business. I don't know how that works.
No. When you are acting as the CEO, this is a total guess, by the way. When you are acting as the CEO, you are a different person than when you are in someone's mouth. Yes. Your corporation is paying the dentist part of you to work on people's mouths, but when you are managing the corporation, you are the CEO. It's like you're a different
So if you're a restaurant
job title.
owner, you are paid some amount of money, some leftovers at the end of the year, whatever the profits are. You're paid that to be the CEO. But if you also work and get a W-2, I don't know if restaurant owners get W-2s, but many jobs do. You hire yourself and you say, like, I'm going to, like my mom's a great example. She works the front office of the building, of the staff, and she's paid a W-2 for that work that she does. She kind of always jokes she makes more money than my dad, because maybe my dad doesn't take the W-2, which might be a big mistake in this weird situation. Right. But it's a weird world where, like, if you're a business owner and you're very small, can you take advantages of all these the same way that other people are? Because in many ways, I would argue it's the business owner that we need to protect the most, because they're the ones that have the jobs, and they're the ones that have the equity in the companies, and they're the ones employing the 300 to 500 people, you know? And so I don't know how all of that works, but that's like a question that keeps coming up, is if you are the owner of the business, can you also be unemployed by that same business and use your W-2 wages to get the relief that you're not getting from your W-2?
Interesting question.
So, and then this is the other one. I don't know that we kind of brought this up, but like, do you actually have to be unemployed to get this? Or is everyone considered unemployed because of the quarantine? When they say unemployment is going to pay this, are people having to actually fire their employees? Or is the government just kind of being like, yeah, if you live, because some of this is dealt on the state level. Most of this is probably dealt on the state level. If Charleston says we've shut down everything, all non-essential businesses are closed, does that count as unemployed? Or are you technically still unemployed, or you technically are still employed because your boss hasn't fired you yet? Maybe you're able to work at home and like you shouldn't get any of this money because now you're just teleconferencing in your work.
And how many people have we spoken to who aren't technically fired, but their hours have been significantly reduced?
And then you're part-time, and this is a question of like, that maybe that's why unemployment numbers weren't as high, is because some people are just now part-time, but that might qualify as being employed.
But this makes Peter Schiff's point even stronger. Imagine you're accustomed to making, $3,000 a month or whatever, but now your hours have been limited and you're only making $1,000 per month. But if you just go on unemployment, now you could start making $2,000 to $3,000 a month. You'd be making way more money.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is ask your boss to fire you. And I'm sure a lot of these bosses, like the one that I spoke with, they will be happy to fire you on paper, with the idea that, hey, when this all dries up,
it might be in their best intention. You get more money out of it. You don't leave me and find another job, and then I just rehire you back when I need you. Like,
I know.
That doesn't
it just
seem...
sounds so wrong, but it's, yeah, I mean, how can you say it's wrong when the government is giving it to everyone? Everybody's starting to talk about how does inflation work at this point. You can't just give people money forever and not have the dollar become significantly devalued.
Well, that's what we're doing, and on top of that, we're printing more money. So it feels like we're throwing like dynamite onto the fire at this point, right?
Yeah, and I watched this really interesting video.
Let me guess by who?
It wasn't Peter Schiff.
It wasn't Peter Schiff.
No,
Thank
no.
goodness. We're getting some diversity
This
here.
guy was just kind of explaining what causes economic crashes and why they happen approximately every 10 years and everything. And he was basically saying in the case of inflation, the people who will do the best, and this is so messed up, but it makes sense, the people who do the best are leveraged to the absolute max, but don't go bankrupt. And so the whole idea here is that if you buy $1 million house or $1 million building and you get a loan on it, and let's just say for argument's sake over the course of the loan, the $1 million building costs you $2 million after interest, But if the dollar over the next 30 years, you know, is cut by, you know, 25% or 50% or 75% or whatever, you can easily get to the point where you actually paid no money in interest. You saved money. You see what I mean? By locking in the value of that property 30 years earlier, paying it off super slowly, not actually having anywhere near that amount of money. So the basic concept is that you would be smart if you knew that inflation was going to go crazy to get as many loans as you could possibly just barely pay, right? You can't declare bankruptcy or it all blows up. But if you could just barely pay it, then at the end of all of these loans, you will have been able to buy far more than anyone else, and your properties will be worth so much more because the value of the dollar is going down so quickly. So anyway, I kind of abide by the idea of like, let's be debt free, let's owe no one money ever, let's...
Yeah, for years I would get in your car and you would always have Dave Ramsey
going, yeah.
And he'd always be taking the calls, and every time it's these rather simple situations. Sometimes they get extremely complicated, but most of the time they're simple, and he's just like, what are you doing? Sell everything, reduce your debt, and live below your means for 5 years, and then call me back. What's the phrase he always has? When you're like debt-free or you're...
His debt-free screams?
Yeah, is that what it is?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I've been a big fan of him and his overall
He's very
outlook.
Conservative on the way that he spends and saves money.
Absolutely.
I think I know I'm even not subscribing to that model.
Sure.
You know, he's taking no risk, never get a loan, buy everything in cash. And I'm like, I think that's wise for 99% of the people out there. But there are times when it feels like you can leverage yourself just a little bit, you know?
Sure,
Don't leverage your main home, but if you ever have a second house, which I don't have, but if I did, you can play around with that a little bit more because your main house is always protected.
Maybe so. I mean, that's certainly the argument.
Here's another little argument that we can have since we're going down this route of the stimulus bill, and it comes back to the minimum wage and the idea that we should have a flat $15 minimum wage around the country. This has been promoted in our politics lately. I'm sure a lot of readers out there from other countries that might have already done this. But this has always seemed extremely faulty in ideology to me. That $15 an hour is the proper living wage for Americans. And I say, well, $15 an hour is very, very different in Seattle or LA or New York than it would be in Montgomery, Alabama, you know?
Sure.
And so that just doesn't seem fair. Maybe in Montgomery, Alabama, I don't want to say you're living like a king making $15 an hour, but your money's going to go a lot further than it would. I mean, in New York, I can't even imagine you would be able to survive for $15 an hour. That seems way too low just to keep someone at a basic income, you know? And so I just think, could this not apply to this stimulus bill as well? Like, you're telling me we're all going to get $1,200? But that seems like, it just doesn't seem fair. It seems like people who need that money in more, like in higher cost of living areas, it's not enough. But then people getting that same amount of money in a lower cost of living area might be getting too much, you know? Maybe you would argue that, we were just talking about like how some people might be actually making more money to be unemployed and to take advantage of all these, right? Maybe that's a lower cost of living area. But then somebody who's in a higher cost of living area might be like, that's not enough. Like, maybe that's less than what I normally made. So it just seems strange to like apply these things on these national levels, right? Shouldn't it be based on some other criteria?
I don't know that I agree with that. I think they put criteria with the $75,000 and $99,000 a year
That seems
income.
so arbitrary. In New York, $100,000 a year is like maybe what you have to make to live in Manhattan, maybe even in the other boroughs. But then in the South, $100,000. I mean, like, there's doctors that make $100,000. It just feels very uneven to me. I mean, some of these big cities like Silicon Valley, I mean, isn't the average income like $200,000 or $300,000, and maybe half of that is in stock options? They're getting paid through their companies with stock, but then that builds income. But they're not making $100,000. I don't think you can survive in like San Francisco. Can you survive there on $100,000 income?
Certainly. I mean, Katie lived in New York and she was making 40 or 50.
And I feel like all her money went to rent. Like, I don't want to say she lived paycheck to paycheck, but
she did live paycheck.
It's extremely difficult to live in a city like New York making less than, I don't know what that number is, $80,000 70 grand, like 40 grand. I just can't imagine paying for the subway every day. The cost of living in New York is so crazy.
People
All
do
the
it.
taxes on Manhattan.
I agree. I don't know what your point is.
I just feel like this just doesn't seem fair to give out a flat number to all of Americans without considering where it is that they live and the cost of living in those environments.
I mean, but then you could take it even further and say that Katie's apartment wasn't that expensive and the guy who lives in the more expensive apartment should get more money than she does because her rent's less. I mean, that doesn't...
Yeah, I don't think you should boil it down to that much because then it's like, are you living beyond your means or something? But I just think you can go on the internet and look up calculators for cost of living. And to live in Key West is a different number than it is to live in Jacksonville and it is to live in, Pensacola and all these different cities. Miami is going to cost more to live there than it would in Destin, Florida.
I understand that, but if people are sitting inside and they don't have to potentially pay their rent or mortgage for 4 months, what is this money going towards? Like, this isn't supposed to be for people to live large. This is just for people to get by.
Well, we need to find out if these loans and these rents and mortgages are forgiven, or is the $1,200 supposed to be spent to your landlord?
I watched a video last night where the guy was talking about getting your mortgage postponed for 4 full months. And you're still getting the money if you postpone your mortgage.
But you still owe that.
Yeah, of course.
So it just seems like a wash to me. Like, why not just go ahead and pay your mortgage with the money that you're getting? Why get behind on it? Why have 4 months?
Well, because I assume that the majority of Americans do not have the extra money to gamble that. They're afraid that things are going to get worse in 2 months or 4 months or 6 months.
But if you're getting $1,200 and your rent hopefully is less than $1,000, and this is what I'm arguing. Many places it's not. New York, it might be $2,000 a month, but in a smaller town, maybe your mortgage your rent is $600 or $1,000 a month. You could take that money, pay your rent, not get behind on that, and then with the $600 you're getting every week from unemployment, and I know that might change. Maybe it's $300, maybe it's $600, but use that money to just buy the food that you need to hunker down and survive. That to me seems like the reasonable thing you should do, instead of deferring your rent and your mortgage for months, and then I don't know what you'd be doing with that money. Wall Street Specs would be saying like you're putting it in the market.
No, you'd be saving it because you probably won't have a job in 4 months, and you're going to have a mortgage payment in 4 months.
What I'm arguing is that you're already getting the unemployment. You're getting the unemployment, and you're treating it as if you do not have a job right now.
I know, but things are not going to... I mean, I guess they would have to be better once we're out of lockdown.
You would hope.
But who knows?
Some good news out of all of this is we might be adjusting our supply chains. Like there's been this movement maybe in the last 10 years that you buy just enough inventory to like keep you going. So we sell flash disks on Amazon, and we would never want to buy 3 years worth of inventory because then it just sits in the warehouses and we're constantly paying to have the storage. So everybody tries to buy the perfect amount to where when you're down to 5% inventory, you order the next supply and it just comes to where your fees are as low as possible. But what we're seeing with, especially the healthcare world, with masks, with ventilators, with gloves, like all these things that seem essential, like how in the world are we running out of masks? Perhaps what's going to happen is companies are going to start saying we need to move more jobs to America and we need to produce more of this stuff in America. And if we don't do it in America because it's still too expensive to hire workers here, then we need to have it in a few other places instead of all in China or all in Vietnam or all in India, like so many businesses do. And maybe something good out of this is more jobs will come to America and companies will diversify their supply chains more so that we're not so reliant on, one place.
Okay.
Think that could be a good thing? Obviously,
maybe.
Obviously, something has gone terribly wrong, not just in the United States, but around the world. Everyone here is talking about the healthcare issue, but the reality is every hospital system around the world, except Singapore, they are all overwhelmed, understaffed. The hospitals are like not able to treat basic conditions. Everyone's canceled elective surgeries and that sort of thing. It's not just American healthcare that's done this. So I think the whole world will learn that we need to somehow maybe look to Singapore and South Korea and figure out like, how do we update our medical field?
I can't imagine that they have extra masks and ventilators in Singapore. I think they just were on top of this virus ahead of time and so they didn't need as many of those things.
Perhaps. It just seems crazy to me when I'm hearing like Ford and even Tesla are now like building things that they are not equipped to build. How can that be a turnaround? How does that make any sense? And how bad does that look for the companies that their job is to build masks? Maybe they're just at full capacity.
Right,
but it just seems so strange. You're going to go to Ford and be like, hey, build this ventilator that you've never built before.
And virtually every one of those companies has been cooperative, patriotic, moving in Trump time, which is to say as soon as possible, sir. But we did have a problem with GM and Ventec. On the one hand, we had Ford and GE moving forward on a similar kind of project, patriotically moving as fast as possible. Over the last several days, we ran into roadblocks with GM. We cannot afford to lose a single day, particularly over the next 30 to 60 days. So President Trump invoked the Defense Production Act as a way of enhancing and accelerating this mobilization. I salute him for doing so. It's going to make my job so much easier. For the most part, we've had tremendous cooperation from the private sector. Today, sir, was the right day to do it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And what I'm hearing in the news is that a lot of the standards are just being thrown out the window. Like we have HIPAA, which is it's a practice kind of like OSHA. OSHA says like you have to follow certain protocols within the health field, and then HIPAA is you have to hold a certain bit of privacy for everybody. And we're just basically saying like at this point, doctors should be able to share anything about their patients because it's going to help us figure out how to solve this problem. But then the patient loses all privacy because of it. And then you have OSHA, which says like this is the standard practice. But if we're like, you know what? If there's a ventilator out there that's not quite yet approved by the FDA or whoever at CDC, it doesn't matter. At this point, we just need to use
it.
whatever
it's better
we have.
than nothing.
And the unfortunate situation of this is I can see in America, I can see a lot of lawsuits coming out of this. As sick and weird as that is, if your family member was put on something that wasn't approved in these dire situations, people are going to come back and sue these hospitals. Like that's an unfortunate thing. And then finally, all I have left in my notes is that there's many companies like Walmart, Amazon, Kroger, and Domino's that are hiring people, I don't want to say at an alarming rate, but they're hiring tens and hundreds of thousands of people because they can't possibly stock the shelves and deliver the pizzas. Also companies like Slack and Zoom, I've been preaching about Zoom for like the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They're hiring more and more people. So like there is opportunities there, both for employment and I guess if you want to invest in companies. Maybe Walmart and Amazon and Kroger are all going to come out of this doing really well because they were the only supply chain. They were the only option.
I just feel like hopefully all of this is relatively short term. I was reading on an investing group last night. People were like, you better jump out of Zoom right now. Zoom is so overpriced it doesn't even make any sense. You've made your money. You made a smart bet. Now get out. How much longer are we going to be stuck inside? Even if it's 6 more months, what's going to happen the second we leave? Zoom's going to go back to where it was before, So like take your money and run there. And then when it comes to the Pizza Huts and everything else who are delivering pizza, like sure, it's great, it's handy right now, but...
Well, I just bought Domino's recently because Domino's is one of those stocks that's like done so well, I think, with the collapse of Papa John's.
Oh, really?
Domino's is like, look at their stock. It's done really, really well. And so my thought was if we're all quarantined, and even if we come out of this, if we go into a depression, like pizza, it's a pretty cheap way of living, and you can have it delivered right to you. It just feels like Domino's has been on a good roll. They're one of those companies where I feel like I'm buying the dip because they are a strong company that's well organized and they will do well.
So their stock has gone down?
Oh, of course.
Oh, okay.
But they've done really well over the last 3 to 5 years, especially when you compare the market. But I think with Zoom, I think you're absolutely right. But I guess I'm anticipating this is going to last longer. I'm seeing everyone I know is using Zoom. And perhaps more online education and teaching comes out of this. Like maybe more people start working from home, and Zoom could be one of the best platforms to help implement that. So I do think that it has a chance to deflate. I think it is kind of a hot YOLO stock. I'm glad I got in early. I rode that up pretty well, but I think there's great potential for them.
I have a business idea. I probably shouldn't be revealing this online, but I don't know how to do it. So somebody who's smarter than me do this, become a billionaire. I've been watching a lot of my favorite podcasts and everything and news channels. They're doing all of their stories remotely now. Everyone's working from home.
Yep.
And maybe they might have like a sidekick or something, but they're in their home. And so
has this happened to late night shows yet? Do you have like
Yeah. So Jimmy Fallon and everything, he's interviewing people over the internet. It's
he's got
so
the keyboard
weird.
guy, he's like Deep Thoughts. What is his?
Haven't seen that. I haven't watched Jimmy Fallon, but yeah, I don't know. But when I'm listening to these podcasts or watching them on YouTube or whatever, you can still hear the lower audio quality. There'll be dropouts and, you know, there's the delay and stuff. Like, there's just issues.
So I know what your business plan is.
What's that?
Your business plan is a way to live stream with somebody, but at the same time on their desktop, it's going to save the audio and video files there, and then you can just send those files to the producer so that you can have the live conversation. That's what you're thinking?
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
a good idea.
So you could have like 5 people in a group. Each computer is recording the highest quality video and the highest quality audio on individual computers. So you can still do it live and it'll be compressed. But then immediately once you're done and you like stop recording, everyone leaves the program open and everyone's computer starts sharing the uncompressed files. And even if you didn't want to do it with video, because video would be really big.
You have the option to turn different things on.
Yeah, sending audio files for an hour-long talk wouldn't be that big.
Yeah.
And then...
But you get on the news and you still hear that horrible audio and you're like, ah.
Yeah, so somebody make $1 billion, send me $1 million, it'd be good.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Should we get out of here? We didn't talk about the stock market. It closed at like -3.
Okay, so it dropped a little bit. I'm on CNN right now.
3.37.
Italy records highest daily jump in coronavirus deaths to date. 969 deaths.
I thought they said
crazy.
Italy was like 3 weeks ahead of us, but then I've heard 1 week. But these numbers, man, they're not good, and I don't think this is ending anytime soon. And I am very bearish in this market. I think
here's another big one. Alabama governor orders all non-essential businesses to close.
Oh, finally. Alabama's like one of the last places. Although I've noticed Alabama's been hit. It hasn't been hit very hard. It's like one of the lowest states. I don't know if that's testing or what. Louisiana, I mean, you've heard this. Louisiana is one of the worst states because of Mardi Gras.
Oh my gosh, every one of these headlines is insane. Vermont will close schools for the remainder of the year.
I've been saying this for like over a week. Is this not already happened?
I mean, that just seems crazy.
Why would you? They won't start in the fall or just this school year?
Oh.
I'm expecting next school year not to open.
I mean, it seems so premature. It seems like we have all summer to decide if we need to do that or not.
I don't think we have that much time.
I don't know. Maybe this is just this school year. Okay.
That
for the
seems-
remainder of the school year.
Yeah, that seems like that should have already been done.
Yeah. Okay. So that's not as crazy.
But yeah, I think if we're watching Italy, I don't think we're getting out of this anytime soon. I think people should prepare to be locked up much longer. And like I said at the beginning of this, I think you're going to go through the same anxieties that we've gone through, where you worry that you have the illness, and you're going to start worrying about the food and being locked up and my business and what am I doing. Like, all those are valid things to worry about. But I know my anxiety has dropped a little bit since we got quarantined initially.
Yeah.
But now I'm worried that we're soon going to have the most anxiety. We're going to start seeing really bad things in the news, and then people that we know actually affected by this and potentially dying. So I do not feel good about any of this. And when I go back to the market, I feel like we just had kind of a last effort bull run. And like I think we're going to go down for a while. Now, how far?
Yeah.
10 or 20%, which would put us at a total of 40%.
Yeah.
If we go down more than that, I mean, we're already in uncharted territories. But I think
last thing I will say, because I will want to keep track of this hopefully in the near future. Katie and I were arguing this morning about, me not really being as safe as I should.
Yeah.
And I've been going to Burger King, enjoying myself with Impossible Whoppers, my favorite fast food delicacy. And she's upset because she feels like I'm putting your life in jeopardy by eating Impossible Whoppers.
Yeah.
So I was trying to make an argument that me going through a drive-through is far less dangerous than her going into a Walmart, being around thousands of people, touching things that have been touched by hundreds or thousands of people previously.
I think I could agree with that.
And we have a grocery store in our neighborhood that has very few people going into it, but it just doesn't have everything she wants.
Yeah.
So I was just making the argument, you're going to be risking your life going and getting the broccoli, because we don't have broccoli here, and you like to eat broccoli. Why is that okay? And it's not okay for me to go to Burger King. And I thought I would win the argument, and she'd go, you're right, I overreacted. And yesterday, remember how I told you, like when I got back, she was upset with me because I had touched my phone, and she was like getting bleach and cleaning. She broke my phone case, so like my charging case no longer works.
How's that?
Because she put bleach like in the case.
Oh gosh.
So I told her that, and she's like, I'm sorry, I overreacted, blah, blah, blah. So I thought she'd go, you know what, you're right, I've just been a little high-strung. Well, she texted me a few minutes ago, and she's like, someone in Humacao now has it. The number of deaths in Puerto Rico, I think we're at like 3 or 4, and you were about to hit 100 cases in Puerto Rico. She's like, I'm not going to go to any grocery store anymore. I will wait until we are completely out of food before I go back to the grocery store. And I'm like, she's gone crazier. She's taken it to the next level. So my whole argument backfired. I'm partly to blame for this.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little nervous about produce, and that's the one thing that Kristen wants more in the house. I can survive on just meat and potatoes, but I guess potatoes are produce. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where you draw the line. I think we have to remind ourselves, and this is starting to become like a controversial topic, that very few people are still getting this, and even fewer people are dying. And if you take the world's population, or the number of deaths, the number of cases even, and divide it by the world's population, it's still not really that bad. If you look at it from that point of view.
Right.
It's not to say that I don't believe this is a serious thing. You can tell how seriously I take this, but there's always got to be that bit of it in the back of your mind, you know? And so, I don't know. This is an unprecedented thing, and I don't know where this is going to lead us. I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to come out of this. Maybe I'll talk about that tomorrow. But in the meantime, it's 5 o'clock. We got this video done earlier than ever. I'm going to go quickly edit this. Maybe this will be online by 9 or 10 o'clock.
Sounds good. If you guys would like to donate to our Patreon, there'll be a link below. 100% of the proceeds are going to the people of Puerto Rico to help the coronavirus situation, which I'm sure will be a big deal over the next potentially year or more. And if you are a photographer, you can head over to fstoppers.com/store. We've got one of the biggest, probably the biggest sale we've ever done. We've been getting a lot of questions. People are a little confused by it. You have to actually add the tutorials to your cart to see the discount, and the more you add, the more of a discount you will get.
But it starts at 30% off of everything.
Everything, and then the Photography 101 course is 100% free, no strings attached. So download that and enjoy it. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you guys tomorrow.